In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how you can install Python. And without further ado, we're starting right now. So if you're already using a Mac OS X, then Python is already pre-installed on your computer. So you could go to the terminal, you could type in Python, and then you're going to find that you already have Python. But a note here that I have already installed Miniconda into my computer, and I've set the path to be using that version. And so that is why I'm using the Anaconda version here. But let's say that if you have just bought your MacBook and you type in Python, then you're going to have a pre-installed version of Python. And in older versions, that might be Python 2.7. If in that case, then you probably want to install the version 3, as we're going to be showing in this video. And so the easiest way is to head over to python.org and then head over to the download section. Just click on it or hover on it, and then you're going to see that it automatically detects what operating system you have. You could just click on the download button here and then just select the operating system that you have. So if you have Windows, click on Windows. If you have Linux, click on it, or Mac, click on it. And then I have a Mac, so I'll click on Mac, and then you just scroll down and then have a look at which version you want. And then for each version of Python, you will see that it has a corresponding release date. And so you want to select from the column here, stable release, instead of the pre-release. So you want to select one of the versions here. And I highly recommend that when you're taking a look at the possible versions that they have here, like you're going to see that there's version 3.9.5, which is the newest one. So typically I would use the version 3.8. So I would use one version older, like one number older. So if there's 3.9, I'll use 3.8. And if 3.10 is released, I'll probably stick to 3.8 or even upgrade to 3.9. And the reason being is that the newest version of Python, most libraries are not supporting that. And so you might encounter some errors or dependency problems because the new version of Python is not yet supported by many of the existing Python libraries. So I'll stick to the older version just for compatibility issues. However, for this particular case, you're going to see here that Python 3.8.11 does not yet have a file. And so if you scroll down a bit, you're going to see that version 3.8.10 has a file for you to download. And so here we have two versions, Intel installer or Universal 2 installer. So let's go with the first one, Intel. And then you could just click on allow and then it'll download into your computer. And then you could just open up the file, click on it, and then you just click continue until everything is installed. Okay, so this is method number one. Method number two is to use Anaconda, and you could go ahead to this Anaconda website. I'll provide you the links in the video description. Or let's say that you head over to Anaconda, you could click on the products and then you could click on the individual edition. And so you're going to see that it is a open source version and it automatically detects your operating system. So for a newbie to the field, I would also recommend to go with Anaconda. But the downside is that Anaconda comes pre-installed with practically everything you need. And the downside is because it might occupy a lot of space on your computer. And so if you're space conscious, then you want to wait for the third option, which I'll be covering in just a moment. But the good thing about Anaconda is that it's pretty beginners friendly and it comes pre-installed with everything that you need to get started in your data science projects or your coding projects. And let's have a look here. So Anaconda, the benefit is that it allows you to manage all of the libraries and the dependency. So back in the days when you install libraries, you probably have to compile the libraries when you install it. Or if you're on a Mac, you probably have to use Homebrew, or you might need to use Boost from C++ in order to compile some of the libraries, such as the RDKit for cheminformatics or bioinformatics projects. And aside from having Conda, which allows you to manage the libraries and packages, the great thing is that you could also manage the environment. And I know Python also has the env, the virtual environment as well. But Conda is also very good in that. And you're going to see here that it comes pre-installed with all of these libraries, so you're good to go. So you have Jupyter, you have Dask, you have SciPy, you have the Spider IDE. So it is a integrated development environment which allows you to have access to a coding environment which will make coding a lot easier when you're coding interactively. And there are third-party plugins as well, such as Kite, which allows code completion using AI. And aside from that, you're going to see that all of the Python libraries that you would need for your machine learning or data science projects is already pre-installed. So you could build your machine learning models, deep learning models. And the great thing is it's free and it comes with this user interface. So you could launch any of the tools that comes along with it in an intuitive way. And if you're coming from enterprise, you could also have the paid version as well. All right, so you could click here to download it, click on allow, and then it will download into your computer. All right, so let's have a look at the third option. Third option is to use the Miniconda. So in a lot of ways, Miniconda is like the trimmed down version of Anaconda. So let's move back to the prior page. So go to the individual edition. So you're gonna see here that there's a lot of Python libraries here, which comes with Anaconda. But then for Miniconda, you're gonna get only Conda. Okay, so Miniconda will not have all of these libraries. So you have the bare minimal. And then if you want to have Jupyter, you just install Jupyter. You just install kind of like an a la carte. You could install whatever you need one by one. So for here, you have 3 flavors to choose from: 3.9, 3.8, and also 2.7. So most of the Python libraries nowadays is supporting version 3, unless you're using a legacy version of some Python libraries that hasn't been updated in years, then you might have 2.7. But then for 99% of the case, you want to stick to version 3. And between 3.9 and 3.8, as I mentioned prior to this, I would go for the older version. So if there's 3.9, I would go for version 3.8. And my explanation is that the newest version may not be supported by all Python libraries because it is a new version, right? So the existing Python libraries might not have support for it yet. So if you have Windows, you want to download one of the version here. So I would go with version 3.8. And if your computer has a 64-bit version of Windows, then you want to click here. So on a Mac, it is 64-bit. So you could click either the bash mode or the PKG. So the difference between bash is this one will be a script file, probably in a .sh. And so to install it, you just go to the terminal and then you just type in bash followed by the name, the file name. Or you could also download the PKG, I'll show you, and then you could just click on it and then it'll allow you to install it in a graphical, like here. You could just click on continue and next until it's finished. And so a quick recap. In this video, I've shown you how you could install Python in one of 3 ways: via python.org, from Anaconda, or also using Miniconda. So in this first episode, I'm going to assume that you already have Python installed on your computer. So whether you're on a Windows, on a Linux, or on a Mac, normally Python is already pre-installed. If not, then I would recommend you to check out Conda or Anaconda because it allows you to manage the Python libraries very efficiently. And so that is a topic for another video. And so to find out whether you have Python or not on your own computer, you could go ahead and fire up your terminal or your command prompt and then just type in Python. And if you see something like this, then it means that you already have Python installed on your computer. And so this is called a Python interpreter, and we're running it directly from the terminal. So we just typed in Python, and then it triggered this interpreter of Python. And so in this prompt, where there's a 3 greater than symbol, you could type in numbers, and then it will print out whatever you have typed in. And so number 1 is an integer. If you think of it as a data type, then the data type of this is an integer. If you typed in 1.2, then the data type is a floating point number. And so how do you know that number 1 is an integer or 1.2 is an integer? How can you find out in Python? Well, you could type and then put in the number or the input that you're wondering about and hit on enter. And then you see that it has int, so it is an integer. And so if you type in type 1.2, and so it is a floating point number, or it is a float. Aside from numbers, you could also type in strings, which is comprising of characters. For example, it could comprise of only a single character and denoted by a quotation mark. And so you could type in type A inside the quotation mark, and then it tells you that it is a string. And so it could also be double quotation mark as well. But the thing is, don't have a double and then a single. Okay, otherwise you'll have an error. And you could also type in like hello world, and then it'll be recognized as a string. So if you type in hello world inside the quotation mark, then it's gonna give you hello world. And you could also do the same thing by typing in print and then hello world. And then you get the printed text of hello world. And another thing about the Python interpreter is that it could also act as a calculator. So for example, you could type in 1 plus 1, you could have 1 plus 3, and it just adds up the number. You could also multiply them as well. 2 times 2, 2 times 3, or even divide. 2 divided by 2. Okay, so now that we're acquainted with typing in numbers, adding the numbers, and the data types of string, integers, and floating point number, let's have a look at how we could create variables and assign values to variables. Like for example, I could create a variable called car equal Honda. And then if I say print, and then I could type in car. And so can you guess what I will get? Because I have already created a variable called car. And if I use the print function, and then inside the print function, I put in car. Yes, you guessed it. So I will get Honda as the printed output. Let's do it. There you go, Honda. Because car is now representing the word Honda, okay? And so what if I create another one? Color equals to white. And then enter. If I type in print color, what will I get? Yes, you guessed it, I will get white. And so what if you type in print and then car, comma, color? What will you get? Okay, so you get the combination of the two words. You notice that it also adds a single space in between. Like for example, you could type in something like this as well. Print, the car brand is, and then you could type in car. And then you could type in color. Alright, I have to switch this a bit because I'm using a single quotation, and so it detects that it is a string inside here. And so it will get confused. So let me use a double quotation mark here. But actually, it would be better to use double outside and a single here and a double here. Alright, so that looks more like it. And so you can see that the combination of the 4 strings here will give you the following sentence. The car brand is Honda and its color is white. And you could even add another one to be a period. But actually it also adds a empty space here. Well, you could also do it like that, just using a simple plus symbol. Okay, so you can see that the print function allows you to combine several strings or several values. It could also be a number. Okay, let me do it again. Let's say $20,000 USD. Okay, and so you can see that we've combined all of these into a sentence. And so let's imagine that you have several variables and then you could just plug in the number at a later time. Let's say that you have already created a template and this is already your template. And let's say that I changed the brand of the car. Let's say that I reassigned it to be Mercedes Benz. And then I changed the color to be blue. Let's see what I get from the previous sentence. So I already have a template here. And if I hit an enter, and so you can see that the sentence is now updated with the new car brand, Mercedes-Benz, and the color has been updated to blue. And actually the number 20,000 could also be another variable. We could also call it price. Let's say we set the price to be 50,000. And then in the above sentence here, in the above code, I'll change this to price. Okay, and now the sentence is updated with the new information. And so you should also note that a variable is without the quotation mark, but if you have quotation mark, then it is a string. Okay, so don't yet get confused with that. Like for example, if I type in print car, I will get the value that is assigned to the car variable. But if I type in print and then quotation mark car, then it will be treated as a string. But if I just use it without the quotation mark, it will be recognized as a variable. Now let's say that I have assigning a variable to be a equals to 1, b equals to 2, and I create another one, c equals to a plus b. Let's say I type in print c, or actually just c. You see that a and b will be added together. So 1 plus 2, because the value of a is 1, the value of b is 2. And so c is equal to the summation of 1 and 2. And so it will be 3. And let's say that I updated the value of a to be 2. And what will c be? C will be updated. Oh, but I have to first reassign it again. I have to reassign c equals to a plus b again, so that it will be evaluated, and then type in C, and it will be 4. Because if I don't run it again, it will use the old information. And so in order to use the new information, I have to run the line here again. So right after updating the code of a equals to 2, I run this line again, and then the value is updated to 4. And so congratulations, in this video, you have already learned how to create variables, how to combine variables, and also how to print the values of a single variable and also a combination of several variables together. And so please stay tuned for more tutorial videos on Python. In this video, we're going to be learning about how to convert data types, for example, from integer to strings, and also from strings back to integer. So first thing that you need to do is go to the Python environment. And so for example, let me create a variable a equals to 5. And I'll create another one, b equals to 5, but as a string. So let's check the data type. I'll apply the type function to a. So I'll get an integer. And I'll apply the type function to b. And so I'll get a string. Okay, so a is an integer and b is a string. Let's say that I want to convert a, which is an integer, into a string. How can I do that? Well, I could use the str function, and then I'll apply it to a. Okay, and so I'm going to assign this to a variable c. And so let me type c, and you can see that it becomes a string. And let me apply the type function to make sure. And so here you can see that it is now a string. So originally a was an integer, and upon using the str function, I have converted the integer to become a string. Okay, so let me do the reverse. Let's say I have a string and I want it to make it into an integer. How can I do that? Well, I could use the int function, int, and then I'll apply the b variable. And so I'm going to assign this to a variable called d. And let's type in d. And you can see here that there's no quotation mark, so it is now an integer. Let's make sure and check that. Type function, and then apply it to d. And you can see here, it is now an integer. So originally, as you have seen, b was a string. And upon using the int function on the b variable, we have already converted into an integer. In prior videos, you have already learned about the various data types, primarily numerical data types, such as integer and floating numbers, and also strings. And so let's say that you want to work with both numerical data and also strings or text data, and you want to combine them together. How can you do that? And so in this video, I will be showing you how, and we're starting right now. So the first thing that you need to do is enter the Python environment. So let's create a variable called a equals to 5. And let's create a variable b equals to car. And so let's say that I want to combine a and b, a plus b. But then I can't do that because I get this error message. type error, unsupported operand types for integer and string. And so what this essentially tells us is that we cannot mix and match integers and string in the above statement. And so in order to allow this to work, we have to make it into the same data type. And so let's have a look. Can we make cars into an integer? Probably not. But can we make the integer into a string? Yes, we could do that. And so in the previous video, I've already shown you how. And if you haven't yet watched that video, I'll provide you the link in the video description, which will show you how you could convert from integer to strings and also from strings to integer. All right, and so let's get started. So let's convert the numerical value here from integer into a string. And so let's do that. So let me create a variable called c equals to str, because we want to convert the a variable into a string. And let's check that. Now it's a string. Type in c, so now it is a string. And so let's do it again. This time it's c plus b. C plus b. And now it works. You can see that we are now able to combine the two variables together because we have already made it into the same data type. And so they are both strings. Let's start over again. Let's say I have a variable a, I assign it to 1, and I have a variable b, I'll assign it to 2, but then I'll make it into a string. Okay, and so now let's combine the two variables. Let's have a plus b. And so notice here that it gives me an error saying that we have an integer and we have a string for each of the variables a and b. And so in order to make this work, in order to solve this error, we will need to make it into the same data type. And so how can you do that? Well, there's two options. You could either make a into a string, or you could either make b into an integer, and then a plus b would work. So in the first example, if we make a into a string, we'll essentially be doing a text concatenation, meaning that we are simply placing the two strings side by side. Let me show you. If I convert variable a into a string using the str function, which I have already shown in a prior video. And so I'll put the links to the prior video in the video description. If you want to learn more about how to convert strings to integer and also integer converted back to strings. And so here we're converting from an integer into a string, and then we're adding it to b. And now it works. And notice that, as I have already mentioned, the string 1 and the string 2 are just simply placed side by side. So it is essentially a text concatenation or a string concatenation. String concatenation. Or we could call it text concatenation. Okay? Simply the merger of two strings together. And now let's go for option 2, where we convert variable b to become an integer. So we could have a plus, and then I'll use the int function to convert variable b to become an integer. And now it works. So 1 plus 2 is 3. And so here you can see that both options work, but then which one do you want? And so based on your coding project, you'll decide which option do you want to go to, option A or option B here, okay? And so congratulations, in this video, you have learned how you could work with both strings and integers and how you could interconvert between integer to string and strings to integer so that you will get the same data type in order to make the operation work. In this video, we're going to be talking about arithmetic operators, which allow us to work with numerical values. And so this includes operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and also calculating power. So in a prior video about data types, I've mentioned briefly that you could use Python as sort of like a calculator. And so in this video, I'm going to show you all of the common arithmetic operators that you could do. All right, and let's get started. So let's start with addition. So with addition, for example, if I have a value of 4 and 2, let me do that. 4 plus 2. So this is addition. So I get 6. How about subtraction? 4 minus 2. I get 2. How about multiplication? 4 times 2. I get 8. And division? 4 divided by 2. I get 2. And notice here that it is a float number. So let's say that we divide another number. so that it has leftover. Like for example, 5 divided by 2. And so I will get the floating number of 2.5. And so let me show you a second way to perform the division. I'll have 5, and then I have 2 / and then I have the value of 2. Let's see what I get. So I get a value of 2, which means that I'm not taking the leftover number. And so I will only take the number here, 2. And so how do I get the remaining number, like 1? Because 5 divided by 2, I get a leftover number. Full number that I would get is 2. And so in order to get the remaining number, I could do this. 5, and then I'll use the percent, and then 2. And then I'll get the value of 1, which is the leftover, right? Because if 4 divided by 2, it is 2, right? And then you have 1 left over. And how about to the power of? Let's say I have a value of 4 to the power of. I'll use double asterisk. Because if I use a single asterisk, it is in multiplication. If I have double asterisk, it is to the power of. And so you could perform the same operation on variables, meaning that if you assign numbers to variables, you could do the same thing. Let me show you. Let me say a equals to 4, b equals to 2, and then I'll have a plus b, or I could have a minus b, a multiplies b, a divided by b, and even the second type of division, right? With the double /. And also the modulo. If any, there's no leftover value here to the power of. Okay. And also make note that I added some empty space for nice aesthetic, but actually you don't have to add the extra space if you don't want to. For example, if I want to just say a double asterisk b, I get the same result. A multiplies by b, a plus b, a minus b, a divided by b, a double /b, right? I get the same results. Okay, so congratulations. You have learned about the various arithmetic operators in Python. List is a data type in Python that allows you to store a collection of data items. And so let's begin. So the first thing that you want to do is go to your Python terminal and let's create a list. Let's say that I call the list A equal, and then a list will have to be specified by using the bracket. So I have a opening and closing bracket, and then the contents of the list. Let's say that I want to put in numbers. I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And enter. And if I type in A, it will allow me to return the contents of the list. And if I want to specifically display a specific element in the list, I could do that using a bracket. Let me show you. I'll type in A, which is the name of the variable A, and I'll have a bracket, opening and closing, and I'll put in the number. And so Python usually start with the number index of 0, and let's put in 0. And then I'll get the first element. And if I do A bracket 1, I'll get the second element. And if I do A minus 1, I'll get the last element. And if I do A minus 2, I'll get the second to last element. So this would be minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, minus 5. Or if you're starting from the beginning, it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say that I want to add a new element into the list. How can I do that? Well, I could type in A, which is the name of the variable, and then I'll put in a pen, opening and closing parenthesis, and then I'll put in a number 6, and let's see what happens. So you see here that I added a new element to the list, which is number 6. Now let's say that I want to add another number into the list. How can I do that? Let's say I want to add a number 0 right here. Let me do that. I'll do a dot insert, opening and closing parenthesis, and then I'll specify the index number where I want the new number to go. Let's say that I want it to go at the last element here. I'll type in -1, comma, and then I'll type in the number that I want to add. And so that would be number 0. Let's see. Okay, so apparently I cannot do that. Let me do it again. And so as you can see here, using -1 doesn't work in this case. And so in order to make it work, you'll have to type a dot insert and then the specific position that you want to insert it. But because we want to add it to the end, we'll have to specify the length of the variable a and then the number that we want to add. You can see here now that we added the number 0 to the end of the list. And so what essentially this will do is it will return the number of element in the list. So length of A means that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so there are 6 elements. And so this will return to a number of 6. And it will add the number 0 to the 6th position. Okay. And so let's say that I want to remove the number 0 here. I have two ways of removing it. The first way, let me show you. A dot remove 0 closing parenthesis. So a dot remove will remove number 0 when it searches the list. Whenever it encounters the number 0, it will delete that one. But then notice here that it's not deleting every element containing the number 0. And so it's deleting only the first 0 that it sees. And so in order to delete the second one, you have to do it again. Okay, so remove will essentially search for the item that you want it to be removed, and whenever it found it, it will remove it. Another way of removing an element from the list is to use the pop command. Let me show you. Let's say I use pop -1. And so you notice here that -1 is the index number. And so -1 is the last element. And so when it removes the last element, it will print it out as well. But then notice that in the above function of remove, it will quietly search and remove the number. But then for pop function, it will remove it, but then also printing out the value that it has removed. And so you could decide on which one you want in your own coding projects. So if you wanted to remove it silently, then you could use the remove, and then you specify the exact numbers that you want it to be removed or the strings that you want to be removed. But notice here that 0 here is not an index number. 0 is the number 0. But then for pop, you have to specify the index number. Okay, so let's say I do a.pop 0. It will remove the first element. So it has nothing to do with the number 0 shown earlier. And let's have a look at the content of the list again. And now we have deleted the first element. And now we have 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say that I want to add another list into the existing list. How can I do that? A.extend. And then I'll add numbers 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's have a look again. And so you see that I have extended the list with the numbers 6, 7, 8, 9. So essentially, I have added another list, the elements of a new list into the existing list shown at the left part here. And now we have numbers 2 through 9. And so congratulations, in this video you have learned about how to create lists, how to work with lists. Particularly, you have already learned how to create it. You have learned how to slice and select the specific position in the list to be displayed. You have learned to add a single element to the list. You have also learned how to use the insert function to add a new element into a particular position in the list. You have also learned how to search and remove a specific element using the remove function, where it searches the specified number or string if you want and then removes it quietly. Or you could use the pop function, whereby you specify the index number and then it will remove the element while also printing out the element value. And then finally, we have also learned how we could extend the existing list with elements of a new list. In Python, there are two types of iteration. The first type is definite iteration, and this essentially means that we repetitively run a statement of code according to a condition that we explicitly define in advance. And the second type is indefinite iteration, and this means that the statement of code is run indefinitely until a condition is met. And so in this video, we will be focusing on definite iteration, and you guessed it, we're going to be learning about the for loops in Python. And so let's get started. So the first thing is to fire up your Python terminal. And let's say that we create a simple list of numbers. Let's call it A. And to create a list, we need to use brackets, opening and closing. And actually, I've shown you how to do this in a prior video about Python lists. And so I'll provide the links in the video description. And let's continue. Let's put in the numbers. And we have 5 numbers. And let's use the for loop to iterate through each of the member. But before doing that, let me show you how we would do it manually. I'll use the print function to print the first element. And if I want to print the second element, I'll do the same thing and change the number from 0 to 1. And then same thing. And And there you go. So you can see that I manually printed out a bracket and then followed by the index number from 0 through 4 in order to get the values in the A list. And let's do the same thing, but then programmatically using the for loop. I'll use for and then I. And before continuing, instead of I could use any term I like. For example, I could call it element in A, and I'll hit on enter, and I'll hit on the tab, use the print function, and an element, and then that's it. And then let's hit enter. And there you go. I'll get the same results here. Using the for loop, I'll get all of the values printed out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can see that I did that using only 2 lines of code. And so I could do the same thing. Instead of typing in element, I could use I. And it'll be shorter, like this. But it also helps to use a term that will provide meaning in the proper context. So that might be a bit easier for you in the future when you look back at the code. And instead of numbers in the list, let me try creating another list, but then using strings. Let me show you. B equals, opening and closing bracket, typing the colors. Okay, so I have 5 colors here. And if I want to print each color manually, okay, and so let's do the same thing using the for loop. For color in B, tab, print, color, enter, enter, and there you go. I get the colors here. And so instead of just printing out the colors, you could also provide some context. Let me show you. Okay, so you could print this, which is constant, and then the color will change with the iteration. Okay, so some awesome things that you could do with for loop. And so this allows you to automate any task that you would normally do. And so instead of doing it manually over and over and over again, you could make use of the for loop to automate that task. And so what task can you use for automation? Well, I'll leave it to your imagination, and it's limitless.